The world was still reeling from the sudden and solemn news of Pope Francis' death when Luis Tangle, known more for his chart-topping bangers than public vulnerability, stunned fans with an outpouring of raw emotion no one saw coming. Within hours of the Vatican's official announcement, Luis posted a 2-minute, dimly lit video to his Instagram stories, a far cry from his usual polished content. His voice, barely above a whisper, trembled as he addressed his 27 million followers. "This one hurts in a way I didn't expect," he began, his eyes visibly red, the silence between his words louder than anything he's ever recorded in the studio. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Within minutes, Luis Tangle and Pope Francis were trending side by side on social media, with fans flooding the comments in a wave of digital grief and support. "Never thought I'd cry over a pop star and the Pope in the same breath," one follower wrote. "This is the most human I've ever seen him," said another. What struck fans wasn't just the fact that he reacted, it was how deeply, sincerely, and unexpectedly he connected with the moment. Unlike the usual flood of rehearsed celebrity tributes, Luis's message didn't feel managed or PR filtered. There were no makeup teams, no stylized backdrops, just a man, barely lit by a bedside lamp, trying to find the words for something bigger than himself. And that authenticity hit hard. Within an hour, the clip had been screen recorded and reposted across platforms, racking up millions of views and prompting headlines like "Luis Tangle breaks down over papal death" and "Pop icon's tearful tribute goes viral." Even fans who weren't religious found themselves moved. "I've never felt closer to him," someone tweeted. "It's like we're grieving together." What was meant as a quiet, almost private message had turned into a communal outcry, a moment of shared emotion in a digital world that rarely pauses for reflection. And for many, it marked the first time they saw the pop star not as a performer, but as a person. For fans who only know Luis Tangle as the magnetic showman behind platinum hits and viral dance trends, his sudden vulnerability over the Pope's death felt like it came out of nowhere. But those who looked closer quickly realized there was much more beneath the surface. Layers of history, quiet admiration, and a deeply personal connection that had gone largely unnoticed until now. Luis has rarely spoken publicly about his spiritual life. Known more for his edgy fashion and electrifying stage presence than for discussing matters of faith, he's carefully cultivated an image rooted in rebellion, reinvention, and glamour. But longtime followers recall small, easily overlooked moments that hinted at something deeper. A rosary bead bracelet worn discreetly during a 2019 interview. A cryptic tweet from 2021. "Grace is something I'm still learning." A shot of a tiny cross tattoo, barely visible near his collarbone, posted without a caption and quickly buried under more glamorous content. At the time, fans dismissed it as aesthetic. Now, they're seeing it with new eyes. It turns out, Luis was raised Catholic in a tight-knit Dominican-American family in Queens, where church on Sunday was as non-negotiable as family dinner. According to a resurfaced interview from early in his career, long before fame rewrote his narrative, he once said, "My grandmother had more pictures of saints on the wall than of her kids. The Virgin Mary watched me grow up." While his public persona moved further away from traditional faith, insiders say Luis never fully left those roots behind. What made Pope Francis different, sources close to the singer say, was his ability to evolve the faith without abandoning its soul. Luis saw him as a rare bridge between the old world and the new, between tradition and acceptance, said one longtime friend. He admired how Pope Francis talked about compassion and inclusion, especially toward the LGBTQ+ community, without losing his spiritual authority. That meant a lot to him. This admiration wasn't just theoretical. In 2020, during a backstage moment on tour in Buenos Aires, the Pope's home city, Luis reportedly asked his team for a private moment to visit a local cathedral. He left behind no photos, no social media hints, just a brief text to a friend that read, "Felt peaceful. Needed that." Now, in light of his tribute, that moment feels less like a detour and more like a pilgrimage. And while the Pope and the pop star never met, their worlds touched in quiet ways. During a charity event in Rome last year, a Vatican representative thanked Luis privately for his anonymous donation to an LGBTQ+ youth shelter funded, in part, by the church. He never spoke about it, never tweeted, but he showed up. All of this makes his recent emotional tribute far more than just a celebrity reacting to global news. It reveals a hidden reverence, a long silent connection between a man of music and a man of faith, two public figures who, despite living in vastly different worlds, shared a belief in compassion, complexity, and change. For fans, it's a chance to see Luis Tangle not just as a performer, but as a person wrestling with identity, legacy, and belief. And for Luis, perhaps it was a moment to quietly honor the leader who helped him reconcile who he is with where he came from. When Luis Tangle finally appeared on screen, no makeup, no filters, just a shaky front-facing camera and the low hum of a fan in the background, it was clear this wasn't a PR stunt or a carefully timed statement. It felt unscripted, unpolished, unapologetically human. "I wasn't going to say anything," he whispered at the start, his voice catching in his throat. "But I can't keep this inside." In the 2-minute video, posted quietly to his Instagram stories just after midnight, Luis didn't use a grand set or dramatic lighting. He filmed the message sitting cross-legged on the floor of what looked like his bedroom. Bare walls, hoodie pulled tight, shadows dancing across his face from a bedside lamp. For a star used to commanding stadiums and shutting down red carpets, the intimacy was disarming. It was a stark contrast to the spotlight he normally thrives in. "This isn't about celebrity," he said. "This is about a man who made me feel seen when I thought I didn't belong anywhere." Luis paused often, visibly emotional, his hand occasionally covering his mouth as he tried to keep composure. At one point, his eyes welled up and he didn't speak for several seconds, just sat in silence, blinking hard, the screen flickering slightly as if the weight of the moment made the technology itself hold its breath. And when he did speak again, the words cut deeper than any lyric he'd ever sung. "When I was growing up, I didn't always feel like I could be both gay and loved by God. I didn't think the church had space for me. But Pope Francis, he changed that." That sentence alone was clipped, reposted, and shared across the internet with lightning speed. Fans, journalists, even clergy members responded to it. Some praised the courage. Others questioned the boundaries between pop culture and religion. But regardless of perspective, no one could deny the power of the moment. Luis, a global music icon with every incentive to stay neutral, chose honesty instead. He continued, speaking not just about his admiration for the Pope's inclusive message, but also about what it felt like to grow up in a household where faith and fear coexisted. "I remember sitting in church, listening to sermons that made me feel small," he said. "But when I read Pope Francis's words about compassion, about mercy, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, like I had a place. Like I didn't have to choose between who I am and what I believe." Visually, the tribute was simple, but Luis's eyes did most of the storytelling. They were swollen, reflective, not with performative grief, but with the kind of heaviness that comes from a wound both old and newly reopened. He didn't name drop. He didn't shift focus to himself. He barely mentioned his music. This was about something more sacred. Near the end of the clip, Luis reached into his hoodie pocket and pulled out a tiny silver cross on a chain, tarnished, worn, clearly not something selected for the camera. "My grandmother gave me this," he said, holding it up briefly to the lens. "She always said, 'God knows your heart before the world knows your name.'" I think Pope Francis understood that better than anyone. Then, as quickly as it began, the tribute ended. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't ask for likes or reposts. He let the silence speak for itself. But the internet did the talking for him. Within an hour, the video had been screen captured and re-uploaded across Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube, some with sobbing reaction videos, others stitched with clips of Pope Francis speaking about love and mercy. "I didn't know Luis was this deep," one fan wrote. Another added, "He just gave us the most honest moment of the year." And perhaps that's exactly what made the tribute so unforgettable. In an era of curated personas and brand-safe statements, Luis gave something real, not just grief, but gratitude. not just mourning but meaning. Within minutes of Luis Tangle's quiet, soul-bearing tribute hitting Instagram stories, the ripple effect began. What started as a deeply personal moment quickly morphed into a cultural flashpoint. Fans around the world, many of whom had never publicly grappled with faith or grief in this way, suddenly found themselves not just watching, but feeling,
sharing, processing, commenting.
The hashtag Luis for Francis appeared within the hour and trended globally by sunrise. People weren't just reacting, they were responding. Screenshots of his emotional message flooded timelines, often paired with tearful captions, heartfelt confessions, or old photos of fans with rosaries, family altars, or church pews they hadn't visited in years. Some admitted they weren't even Catholic but felt moved, as if he was speaking directly to a part of us we forgot we had. Others saw reflections of their own struggles in Luis's words, the feeling of being caught between identity and belief, of trying to hold on to faith in a world that often asks you to let it go. TikTok became a montage of emotion. Reaction videos piled up, fans openly sobbing, whispering, "Oh my God," between pauses, showing the same cross necklaces or keepsakes their own families passed down. One particularly viral clip featured a Gen Z user, mascara running, holding back tears as she said, "I never thought a pop star would be the one to make me rethink what the church meant to me." That video alone pulled in over 4 million views in under 24 hours. And it didn't stop with fans. Fellow celebrities, artists, and influencers, some religious, some not, stepped in to echo the sentiment. Singer Amara Velez, who previously collaborated with Luis on a Latin Grammy-winning duet, reposted his tribute with a simple caption, "This is why I love you. Truth always." Meanwhile, openly queer actor Riley West tweeted, "Never cried over a pope before." But Luis just reminded us that grief is layered, and sometimes healing comes from the most unexpected places. Even religious figures responded. Father Thomas Marino, a progressive priest with a strong social media presence, stitched Luis's tribute with a heartfelt message of his own. "I've preached sermons with less theological depth than this man's 2-minute reflection." The clip drew praise and controversy in equal measure, sparking spirited debates in comment sections, and even a short segment on a morning news show titled, Pope, and the Power of Unexpected Grief. Luis, for his part, said nothing more. He didn't follow up. He didn't repost his own video. He let the world carry it, and they did. Over the next 48 hours, tributes from fans evolved into something bigger. Some began lighting candles and posting photos of small altars made in their homes, tagging Luis and quoting lines from his video. One fan posted a drawing of him holding hands with a stylized Pope Francis surrounded by doves. It went viral across Instagram, racking up over 800,000 likes and eventually catching the attention of art curators looking to feature it in a pop faith crossover exhibit. By the third day, a trending thread on Reddit's r/pop culture chat titled, "Why Luis Tangle's Pope Tribute Feels Like a Cultural Shift" had thousands of comments. It became a place where people shared their own stories of religious trauma, reconnection, and the feeling of being cracked open by someone you didn't think could relate. The top comment read, "He did in 120 seconds what sermons haven't done for me in 20 years." The resonance of his tribute had surpassed the confines of celebrity culture. This wasn't just about Luis mourning the Pope. It was about how a global icon inadvertently opened up a space for millions of people to confront their own complex relationships with faith, identity, and loss. He'd started a conversation that institutions had often failed to initiate, and he did it without theatrics or strategy, just honesty. And in that honesty, Luis Tangle achieved something rare. He stopped being just a star people followed. For a moment, he became someone they trusted. What began as a 2-minute video posted late at night, quiet, unrehearsed, and almost too intimate for a platform as loud as Instagram, quickly transformed into something larger than Luis Tangle, larger even than the passing of Pope Francis. As the tribute spread across screens and news cycles, it became clear that what people were responding to wasn't just the grief or the tribute itself. It was the permission. Permission to feel deeply, to revisit long-buried questions of faith, and to admit that belief and identity don't always sit comfortably together. Luis had done what religious leaders, politicians, and even social movements have often failed to do. He opened a door without demanding anyone walk through it. In those brief, trembling words, he acknowledged the complicated intersections so many navigate, being spiritual but not religious, being part of a faith that hasn't always made space for their identity, and still wanting to believe in something bigger than themselves. His message didn't preach. It didn't persuade. It simply made space. And for millions, that space was sacred. The timing of the tribute mattered too. Pope Francis, known as a reformer within the Catholic Church, had spent much of his papacy redefining what compassion could look like inside an institution historically slow to evolve. His death marked not just the end of a life, but the closing of a chapter, one where tentative bridges had finally begun to form between old doctrine and new hope. Luis's message didn't just grieve the man, it grieved what he represented: progress, imperfection, and the slow, painful movement toward inclusion. That's what made the tribute resonate across demographics, generations, and even ideologies. Elderly fans commented on how proud they were to see the youth respecting the church again. Queer followers posted about how healing it was to hear someone say, "I didn't think the church had space for me," because that wasn't just his truth, it was theirs. Journalists and think piece writers began dissecting the moment as a flashpoint, the kind of viral vulnerability that doesn't fade quickly but lingers, shifts perspectives, and invites reflection. Think tanks and cultural critics chimed in, with some framing Luis's tribute as the beginning of a new kind of public spirituality, where celebrities, rather than religious institutions, serve as emotional intermediaries for mass audiences. Others compared it to the way Princess Diana humanized monarchy, or how athletes have used moments of silence to spark social movements. In a culture increasingly skeptical of institutions, Luis's video felt like the rare moment where people trusted the message because it was coming from someone who wasn't supposed to deliver it. And that's precisely why it hit so hard. Luis Tangle is not a priest. He's not a theologian. He's a global pop icon who built his empire on beats, bodies, and spectacle. But in that moment of stillness, he stepped into something different, a vessel for collective mourning, a bridge between sacred and secular, a symbol of a generation searching for meaning without a map. His silence after the tribute only deepened its resonance. He didn't tour the talk show circuit. He didn't monetize the moment with merch or music. He didn't even release a statement. And by resisting the urge to capitalize on the reaction, he gave the tribute the reverence it deserved. Fans noticed and respected it. What this moment ultimately proved is that cultural influence isn't just about visibility. It's about vulnerability. Luis Tangle, without intending to, showed that when public figures speak from a place of unguarded truth, they don't just command attention. They change the conversation. His tribute wasn't the kind of viral that burns fast and fades. It was the kind that burrows in, the kind people remember when they're alone at night, scrolling through their thoughts instead of their feeds. And maybe that's the most powerful tribute of all, not just to Pope Francis, but to the idea that even in a fractured world, someone saying, "I didn't think I could belong," can help countless others realize maybe they can. As the days passed and the immediacy of Pope Francis's death began to settle into history, one moment from Luis Tangle's tribute remained etched in the minds of millions. The final seconds of silence, when he held up his grandmother's old cross, eyes glistening, lips pressed together as if holding back the weight of 1,000 unsaid prayers. There was no final line, no dramatic sign-off, no tearful goodbye. Just a quiet inhale, a trembling exhale, and then the video ended. But for countless fans, that breath said more than words ever could. That image, a global pop star, alone in a hoodie, holding onto a worn silver cross like a lifeline, has since become iconic. It's already been turned into fan art, used in tribute videos and quoted across platforms in captions, posts, and even sermons. One widely circulated tweet summed it up simply. Luis didn't say amen. He became it. And maybe that's why the tribute struck so deep. It didn't tell people what to think. It made them feel. It didn't aim to be perfect, polished, or even public. It just was.
Honest. Bare. Human.
In a world that often values performance over presence, Louise Tangle gave us something rare. A moment that wasn't selling anything, solving anything, or spinning anything. It was just one person, in grief, letting the world see what most of us are too afraid to show. The story could have ended with likes, shares, and headlines, but it didn't. It kept moving, quietly like grief does, gently like grace. And while the tribute may fade from trending lists and algorithms, what it sparked, reflection, reconnection, and the courage to feel out loud, will linger far longer. Maybe Luis won't speak about it again. Maybe he won't need to, because in just 2 minutes, he said something many have been waiting their whole lives to hear, that it's okay to question, to mourn, to hope, and to believe, even if you're still figuring out what that means. So the next time someone says pop stars can't be prophets, show them this. Show them the tears, the silence, the cross, and let them sit with the truth that sometimes the most sacred moments don't happen in churches. They happen on your phone at midnight when someone you admire reminds you, without even trying, that your heart still knows how to listen.